Hello. About a decade ago, I felt compelled to give a sermon in my home church, a United Church in Mississauga, suburb of Toronto. It was called The Divine Names, 5 Steps Up from Paganism. And the reason I felt compelled to give it at that time was that, well, our background in the Watchtower, obviously, you'll know the relevance of the divine names to dialogue with Jehovah's Witnesses. Some witnesses never get over the idea that somehow the name Jehovah sets apart one religion from the other. So that's dealt with in this booklet, as you'll find out. 2 other reasons had come forth, though, to make the issue of divine revelation, specifically of the divine names, an important issue. 9/11. Islam and its claims and the sudden relevance of this name Allah had brought the divine name in a new sense to the attention of the Christian culture and even the broader culture. And in the United Church of Canada, which is always on the vanguard of political correctness, this battle was being fought in a way that maybe back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s we couldn't have expected, namely that not only were gender-neutral names now being sought for God himself, and therefore the pronoun him was being removed even from hymns, that is from the hymn book, H-Y-M-N, that is. Hymn was being removed from the official hymn book of the United Church of Canada, and of course in a lot of Bibles by this time. Even further and far more serious from a theological point of view, there was an effort being undertaken at that point among the officials of the United Church to remove the title God the Father from the hymn book. There was a purging of even references to the pronoun him and the Father specifically from the older hymns of the church, even not just newer hymns reflected this sentiment of political correctness, but even it must go back to purging church history of the sentiments of our ancestors, who after all had written most of our familiar hymns. So I felt a triple reason at least for putting together this booklet, which originally occurred in sermon form. On the front I put a picture of F.F. Bruce, the great Brethren New Testament scholar, who in his commentary on the Gospel of John said that the theme of the Gospel of John and the work of Jesus Christ himself primarily could be summed up as the revelation of God the Father. So to remove God the Father from the consciousness of Christians, let alone the general public, was a step backwards from Christianity, a step a long way backwards. So in this booklet we have a listing of the 5 most prominent designations of God in the Bible, from the beginnings of Genesis to the end of the New Testament itself, the epistles of John, the Gospel of John, and the Revelation. So I wanted to go through the booklet itself, and again I'll read it because it's carefully and I think fairly concisely argued. Here's how we begin the discussion. The divine names, 5 steps up from paganism. It is true that not all of us are called to be missionaries of the gospel, let alone apostles, literally one sent forth to preach the gospel. Yet it is an apostle, Peter, who commands Christians to sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you. That's 1 Peter 3:15. So an apostle tells us that we are to be apologists. How do we measure up, we defenders of the faith? When Peter urged us always be ready, the context of this command was the immediate threat of suffering for the name Christians bore. Nero ruled. And what was Nero's version of entertainment tonight? Christians facing wild animals, even burning for their faith. What was the name that made them so phenomenally unpopular? Nero didn't, after all, burn Jews nor pagans, certainly not citizens of Rome. We are all of us called to be apologists. When we make a defense for the hope in us, Peter adds, we should do so with gentleness and reverence. So when a Jehovah's Witness calls upon us, and we gently and reverently allow him to express his hope, what will we hear? That unless you call on the name Jehovah, you have no hope of getting out of this age alive. How will we show a Jehovah's Witness he is mistaken? So 15 million people approximately on this planet believe that the name Jehovah separates the saved from the lost. But there are 100 times that number who will tell you that there is one God only, and his name is Allah. How will we respond gently and reverently to those who will die and perhaps even kill for the name Allah? Perhaps Christians or prior generations could ignore this question, but can we? Does it really matter at all what we call God? Or are the exponents of radical Christianity right? That such conflicts over theology just divide us and get in the way of loving our neighbor as ourselves. In other words, so they say, all names lead to God. So in the second segment, we'll talk about the first two titles or names of God that come to prominence in the book of Genesis.